The building was silent, the kind of silence that only comes after a long day when the last footsteps have faded and the hum of computers has been replaced by stillness. It was close to midnight when David, the CEO of a large technology company, decided to take a quiet walk through the office. For weeks he had been working undercover, blending in with employees, trying to see his company from their perspective rather than from the luxury of his corner office. As he stepped into the lobby, something caught his eye. A faint glow flickered in the corner, barely noticeable against the darkness. Curious, he moved closer. There, sitting at the small security desk, was the night guard. His posture was tired, his uniform slightly worn, yet his focus was razor sharp. In his hands was a thick, dog-eared engineering textbook, the source of light, a tiny, almost dying flashlight. The overhead lamps had been turned off to save electricity, but that didn't stop him. David paused. He could have kept walking, ignored what he saw, but something about that sight, this man fighting exhaustion with nothing but a flashlight and determination, struck a chord deep within him. The next night, David returned at the same hour, curiosity gnawing at him. Sure enough, the guard was there again, hunched over his book, lips silently moving as he tried to absorb complicated formulas. David approached slowly. Long night, he asked gently. The guard jumped a little, embarrassed. He quickly closed the book and forced a smile. "Oh, sorry, sir, just passing the time." But David had seen enough. That didn't look like passing time. He said kindly, "What are you studying?" There was a pause before the guard answered. "Engineering," he admitted quietly. "I'm trying to finish my degree. I had to drop out when my mother got sick. Bills piled up and someone had to provide, so I took this job." He looked down at his flashlight, the beam already dimmer. "It's not easy studying between shifts, but one day I want to design things that make life better. I can't give up, not when my little boy looks up to me." David felt his chest tighten. Here was a man working 12-hour night shifts, yet still clinging to his dreams with both hands. Over the next few weeks, David quietly watched. Night after night, the scene repeated itself. The guard, whose name he learned was Marcus, did his rounds, checked the doors, ensured the building was safe, and then returned to his corner with that same battered textbook. Sometimes Marcus's head would droop and the book would slip from his hands, but instead of giving up, he'd jolt himself awake, rub his eyes, and press on. His notes were neat but written on scraps of paper, the margins filled with formulas and diagrams. David couldn't help but admire him. He thought about the comfortable upbringing he had enjoyed, the private tutors, the opportunities handed to him simply because of who his parents were. And here was Marcus, fighting with nothing but grit, determination, and an old flashlight. It stirred something in David, a painful realization. How many men and women like Marcus were working quietly in the shadows, their potential hidden, their dreams buried under responsibility. One evening, David decided it was time. He approached Marcus more directly, this time with purpose. "You know," David began, "you've inspired me more than you realize." Marcus chuckled softly, confused. "Me, I'm just a night guard, sir." David shook his head. "No, you're far more than that. You're a man who refuses to give up. You're a father, a dreamer, a builder in the making. Do you know who I am?" Marcus frowned, unsure. David took a deep breath. "I'm not just another employee. I'm David Carter. I'm the CEO of this company." The words hung in the air. Marcus froze, eyes wide in disbelief. He stammered, You're the CEO, but why are you here talking to me?" "Because your story matters," David said softly. "Because I see the fire in your eyes, the hunger to learn, the refusal to surrender, and I can't ignore that." Tears welled in Marcus's eyes as David continued. "I want to sponsor your education, fully, tuition, books, everything you need. And when you're ready, I want to bring you into our engineering department. You don't belong in the shadows. You belong where your ideas can shine." Marcus covered his face with his hands. For years he had carried his burden quietly, never expecting anyone to notice, and now in one conversation his life was being rewritten. Months later, Marcus stood outside a university building, his backpack slung over his shoulder. His uniform had been replaced with jeans and a shirt, his flashlight with notebooks and a laptop. He was finally walking into a classroom, not as a dreamer fighting against the odds, but as a student with a future. And sitting quietly in the back row, that first day was David, watching proudly. He didn't need recognition. What mattered was seeing Marcus step into the life he had always deserved. Word spread through the company, and soon others were inspired too. Employees began sharing their own stories of resilience. The culture shifted. People felt seen, valued, understood. As Marcus studied harder than ever, he also began mentoring others, proving that kindness ripples outward, touching lives far beyond our imagination. The story ends not with a man who became an engineer, but with a reminder. Sometimes the brightest light shines not from wealth or power, but from determination in the darkest places, and from one act of compassion that changes everything. The story of Marcus and David reminds us that greatness often hides in the quiet corners of life. A tired security guard, studying by the dim beam of a flashlight, carried within him not only the weight of responsibility, but also the spark of extraordinary potential. And it took one person, a leader willing to see beyond titles and uniforms, to recognize that spark and help it shine. What this story teaches us is simple yet profound. Compassion has the power to change lives. Success is not only measured by profits or positions, but by how we lift one another up. When we choose to see people for who they are, not just the roles they fill, we create a ripple of kindness that touches far more lives than we can imagine. So remember, these dreams don't die in the dark. Sometimes all it takes is a single act of generosity to bring them into the light.